Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Esther, second chapter, continuing from where we left off in the first chapter. Pretty much you had it ended with the decree being made, right, where due to Vashti, right, the previous queen, due to her refusing to come at the king's commandment, right, she was in other words banished, and a decree was made, right, that women ought to honor their husbands so that there wouldn't be this revolt and tension in households. Anyway, when all that was done, right, leading into Esther chapter 2, we see here, as it says, Vashti's successor sought. And then here, this is basically the introduction of Esther, right? How she makes her way, or how the Lord makes a way for her to come into the palace, right? So this is Esther chapter 2, verse 1. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. So for a period of time, as he was pissed because of what she did, hence the judgment was brought upon her. But remember, it was made law, and the law of the Medes, right, the Persians and the Medes, they don't change it or alter it. So when he remembered, right, basically he started to miss her and think about these things. It started to, you can imagine, right, that it got him a bit down. Verse 2, then said the king's servants that ministered unto him. And also keep in mind, right, she was queen. So and as we're about to read in this chapter, the king, in this case, the king had many women, concubines and so on, but not every one of them was a queen. So that would have to mean that Vashti would have had to have pleased him to the point where he made her queen. So after all of that, now she's gone. So that's, you can sort of imagine how he's feeling about that. Anyway, verse 2, then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, so those that were in his court, those that attend to his needs, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom. So in this case, like overseers, those who'd be in charge of this task in each province. Keep in mind, each province, and I showed the image, the Achaemenid Empire. There we go. And I guess we could use really any one of these. But you see this right here? You see this whole vast region from Ethiopia to India, including all this region here. This was a part of the Persian Empire. So, and this was broken up into different provinces. So you can imagine, as they said, to seek out those fair, meaning beautiful young virgins, women. In this case, it's women that hadn't, laid with any man before, untouched, from all these different areas. So, I mean, damn. Right. But as it says here, that they should be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins onto Shushan the palace, which is over there somewhere right here. Here it's spelled Susa, but it's talking about the same place. So this is where the palace was. And they brought all the fine women from all around. Now it's not really that different, right? Because when you read in I think it's First Kings or Second Kings, one of those, when King David was about to die, what was one of the methods they used? They sought out a beautiful young virgin, I believe she was an Issacharite, and brought her to see if she would be able to arouse him, right, so he could get heat, as the scriptures put it. So in any case, continuing, it says that they may be gathered together, or that they may gather together all the fair young virgins onto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women. So today would call it a harem, right? But this was a separate, and then you can imagine it wasn't just like a 2-bedroom apartment. When it talks about the house here, it had to be like a big, huge vicinity where these women would be for a period of time before they would then go and see the king. So all these fine young virgins were brought to this house, which they called here the house of the women, onto the custody of Hegai, because as we read on down, the pronunciation or the spelling of his name is actually, I think it's Hegai or Ei. Anyway, the king's chamberlain. And most of the time, these would be eunuchs, actual physical eunuchs, meaning they would be castrated. Like they would really have their parts cut off because they were in charge of the women. And to ensure that there was nothing that would be going on over there, they would make sure that these men had their parts removed. Anyway, it says here, keeper of the women, and let their things of purification be given them. So these women would be brought to this place, and they would be provided with different oils and things needed to purify them. Verse 4, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. So this was the idea or the recommendation by one of the king's servants to say, hey, you know, you're missing her now, but look, like today, you have some people where their friend goes through some breakup and they're like, look, bro, it's all good. There's a lot of, there's plenty of fish out in the sea. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll try to take them out to like a club or a bar or a party to meet someone else to take their mind off of the first chick. Well, in this case, being in this scenario, it wasn't about going to the club or going out. The king had the authority and the power to have the finest women brought to him. Verse 4, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And we read this in the editions of Esther, right, chapter 11. Verse 7, and he brought up Hadassah, or Hadassah, which that was her actual Hebrew name, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. So Esther was Mordecai's cousin. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful. So being that Esther, her parents were dead, Mordecai, being her cousin, took her under his wing and took care of her as his own daughter. And as it says here, she was fair and beautiful. So she was really good looking, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it could very well be that this happened when she was very young, when her parents died. And so maybe, you know, he was close, and, you know, he took her to be his daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together onto Shushan the palace. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is, so it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard. This right here is not overnight. This is a description of a passage of time, because I just showed you how huge this province is, right? And a decision has now been made in Susa or Shushan the palace. So the king says, okay, send out this alert, so everybody in the empire, all the provinces, are aware of this, And then they then have to start making the search. So it doesn't give us details as to how the protocol was, but maybe there could have been a period of time that each province was given to gather the finest young women, and then not only finding them and gathering them from the different parts, but then also traveling and all coming here to the palace, right? Or at least to the house of the women. So it came to pass is a period of time. It could have been months, right? Could have been a year, could have been years, who knows, right? But I mean, I don't think it would be that long, but it wasn't something that happened overnight. And when many maidens were gathered together, many maidens. Here it is. You can't even get one proper woman here in Babylon. This guy done had many maidens. Anyway, and when many maidens were gathered together onto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, see the name change right there, that Esther was brought also onto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. So she was a part of these women here. And keep this in mind, that at that time, to hear something like we're looking for, this X amount of, this is just an example, right? X amount of damsels or young women that will be taken to be with the king, to be in his household, and if they please the king, then they can become the next potential queen. That's not something that, like how the world looks at it today. Oh, what? Hell no, I don't want that shit. No, back then that's something that people what? A chance to be the queen? Whoa, hold on, what? To get to go to the palace? To get to be, whoa, So you would have families, right, all bringing their hey, my daughter, no, take my daughter, because remember, the in the normal sense, the father's already, now he has to deal with, if he has daughters, he has to deal with making sure they're good, but also finding a good suitor for them. And you may have had a family that may have been okay but not rich, but now there's a possibility for their daughter to become the queen. So you got to think about it from the perspective of how it would have been back then, not right now. Okay, so you know, it's not like they were breaking into people's houses and just kidnapping their daughters and then taking them over there to the palace. So where were we? Verse 9, and the maiden pleased him, this being Esther. So when she was brought there and she met Haggai, right, the chamberlain, the one in charge, she pleased him, meaning that he took a liking to her, not in a like in a sexual way, but more in like a, this person is cool. Naturally there's some people that you just like, I like this person and I favor this person, right? So in this case, if there's anything that comes through, I'm gonna look out for them, that kind of thing. It says here, and the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification. So we're talking about like oils, different purification items, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. So not only did they get belongings, things that they would use, but they also had 7 maidens, and these would tend to their needs, basically. See, back in the ancient world, in royal households, and in some well-off households, it wouldn't be, for example, the wife is the one that's actually physically doing everything. No, you would also have maids and servants that would help, and the wife, or the mistress, right, the main woman of the house, would be in charge of them, similar to Sarah and Hagar, similar to Joseph's mother, right? Anyway, Rachel and Leah, they also had handmaids, and these were maids or servants that would serve them. So here she was given 7 out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids onto the best place of the house of the women. In other words, he gave them the best spot in the house. Verse 10, Esther had not shewed her people nor her kindred. So she didn't tell anybody where she was from, who her people were, or what her nationality was. So nobody knew that she was actually an Israelite. For Mordecai had charged her that she should not shew it. So Mordecai, being her cousin, right, commanded her not to tell anybody where she was from or what her nationality was. Verse 11, and in this case, you had women from all over the known world. So it's not like a matter of people already knew that you would have women of different nationalities coming from all different areas. So it's not a big deal if she didn't go around parading where she was from. Verse 11, and Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. And remember, as we read before, and as we even read here, Mordecai was also in the court, right? He wasn't just like a regular guy walking around. He was a part of the king's court, like one of his servants or his ministers. So he would always walk there every day around the house where it's at to see how is Esther, is everything okay, what's going on, what's the status, what's happening. Now when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women. So when it was time for the woman to go spend a night with the king, before that, they would purify themselves for 12 months, so a whole year. For so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. So for 6 months they would, bathe and be oiled and all these things. It doesn't mean they're gonna sit in a tub for 6 months. No, it means like every night or every morning, or they had some form of a routine where they would be cleaning and purifying themselves. So at the end of that year, both inside and out, they would be fresh. Their skin would be softer, right? They would smell better. It's not like they would have to really put on, today you have like cologne and perfume, but because of constantly purifying themselves with these oils, it would make their skin softer, make their skin, shine smoother, like all of these health benefits and cleansing benefits they would have by the end of that 12-month span before they could go and spend the night with the king. So this guy was Verse 13, then thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women onto the king's house. Because see, they didn't live in the same area, right? There was one area dedicated for the women, and this was before they went to spend the night with the king. And then there was another area that was for the women after they had spent the night with the king. In other words, the concubines. So here, whatever it is they wanted to take with them, they were allowed to take. Dresses, whatever. Verse 14. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz. So that's the second area, like I just explained. The king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. This is talking generally about how the process would be. So the woman would go, she would spend the night with the king. After that, she would be sent to the second house, and she would stay there until she was requested. If the king requested her by name, as it says here. Verse 15. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai the king's chamberlain the keeper of the women appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So you can imagine she was very beautiful. So Esther was taken on to King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So remember how I said it takes time, right? It took some time from the first verse that we just read up until this point, because I believe the events that took place in the previous chapter, what are we on, verse 16? In the previous chapter where Vashti, disobeyed the king, right? It says this was in the 3rd year of his reign. So being that this was in the 3rd year of his reign, and Esther came on to him in the 7th year of his reign, that's what, a good 4 years in between when Vashti was banished and these women were going in onto the king. But anyway, verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So Esther became the new queen. And this was definitely this is all the doing of the Heavenly Father, because he put that spirit upon the king to favor Esther. And when you look at like how men deal, as the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When a man typically sees a chick, it's not more so about her. That's why women are, their beauty is like the standard kind of thing, right? It's not more so about what she's doing, okay? But really it's about what he sees in her or what he wants, right? So usually when a guy sees a chick, he wants to talk to a chick, he approaches a chick, whatever the case is, it's not because of something that she has done, or because most of the time you see a random chick, you don't even know what she does. But what attracts you to say, damn, let me go and say hello, right? Is the beauty. And when a man likes or loves a woman, it's because he loves the woman, not necessarily about what anything this, that, and third, and it's about what he feels for her. So what the Lord did was he put the spirit upon Ahasuerus to genuinely have that love for Esther, because you in the eyes of somebody else, right, they could have made a claim that there were other women that looked better than Esther, or that, I don't know, whatever the case is, better than Esther. But then it goes back to the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure. That's just the saying, but you get the point. So what the Lord did by giving Esther favor in the sight of Ahasuerus, that she would be chosen, is what brought her up into this role of queen, which would then play a bigger role later on. Verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces, a release being like a holiday, and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. And meaning once all of them, once he had gone through the rotation, right, all of them were now in the house of the concubines. Then, as it says, Mordecai sat in the king's gate, meaning that sitting in the king's gate in this sense, meaning that he was a part of managing the affairs of the king, right? As we know, let me actually see if it'll pop up here in the Bibles, or actually dictionaries. Should be under gate. There you go. Let's see. Yeah, so it says here, at the gates of cities, courts of justice were frequently held, and hence judges of the gate are spoken of in the precepts listed here. At the gates, prophets also frequently delivered their messages. Precepts are listed there. Criminals were punished without the gates. By the gates of righteousness, we are probably to understand those of the temple, and then it goes on and on. But in this case, right, the gates being at the gates would mean that you would be somebody of importance, either in the king's court, somebody that would handle royal affairs or matters that would pertain to the kingdom. So Mordecai played a role in there because he was a part of the king's court. So as it's saying in verse 19, by the time all the women had gone through, they had seen the king, they were now sent to the second house as concubines. At this time, Mordecai was, I guess in this case, one of the higher ups in the king's court. Verse 20, Esther had not yet shewed her kindred nor her people. So even at this point, she still hadn't told anybody who she was in terms of nationality wise, or who her people were, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So ever since she was raised or young, she obeyed what Mordecai had told her to do. And likewise she did so here. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those who kept the door, so these were the part of the king's bodyguards, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. Now, we read this in the additions to Esther chapter 11, which is sort of the prologue, right? The in terms of chronological order here. So it's mentioned here as well in Esther chapter 2, and at this point, it's just gonna recount what we read already in there, but nevertheless, still gonna go through it. So Mordecai, while he's fulfilling his role, he's doing his job. And this time, you had these two guards here who were plotting to, when it says lay hands on the king, realistically speaking, they were probably trying to assassinate him or kill him, because if you are bold enough to plan to lay hands on the ruler at the time, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be dumb enough to say, oh, let's just beat up the king and then leave him alive and then keep going. Because what do you think is, first off, you beat somebody regularly up, a regular person, you beat him up, they're coming back looking for you for revenge. What do you think is going to happen? You beat up the king and you left him. He's going to find your ass and you're going to die. So when they sought to lay hands on the king, realistically speaking, they probably wanted to take him out, kill him. Verse 22, and the thing was known to Mordecai, so he found out, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. So this, when we read in the additions to Esther, it doesn't mention here that he told Esther and then Esther said it on his behalf, right? It just mentions that he certified the king, so the king was aware that this is what was happening in the background. Okay, but here there's a bit more context to let us know that, okay, this is the case, because Esther was closer, so he had an in through her. It says, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. So she let it be known that, hey, Mordecai, this such and such, this is what Mordecai found out, and so on. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree. So when they looked into it, they examined them, they interrogated them, they found out that, okay, these guys really were plotting on the king. And so they hung him. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So there was a record that was noted of this event of Mordecai saving the life of the king in the records or the Chronicles of the king. And that brings us to the end of the book of Esther, the second chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.